In this video, we're going to introduce the Django admin site, and I'm just going to give a basic tour of what this site is and how it's used. And to begin, make sure that you've created and installed the Chapter 6 app into your project by including it in the installed apps list, like I'm doing here in your settings.py file. And in your main urls.py file of the project, go ahead and add an include path to your chapter 6 urls.py file. And it's inside that file where we're going to include this admin path, which registers all of the admin site URLs that are found in the django.contrib library. And let's also make sure that we have data to work with. And so the code of this book provided a chapter 3 JSON file, which is a fixture for chapter 3. Go ahead and copy that into your project and load it into your database using the python manage.py load data command that you see here. And then go ahead and run your project. And now you could go to the admin site by accessing localhost 8000/8admin. And then the user is admin, and the password is my new password. And you might wonder why mine is black instead of the traditional colors that you would see in the Django admin panel. One thing that I do notice is that if you use themes and add-ons, especially in Firefox, that will relate to how you view Django. And so this is what most people would normally see. And then the first exercise we did in this chapter was to create a seller's admin. So if we click onto the sellers here, we'll see that this is what's considered the change list view, and it provides a list of every single object that's found in the sellers table. And the data fixture for chapter 3 only provides one of those objects, and that's the admin object that you see here, which is a staff and a super user. And the columns within this table, if we go to our chapter 6 admin.py file, we'll look into the seller admin class that we created, and the list display actually tells Django what columns to provide, and the names of those columns, if we take a look at the name field here, it's actually called business name. That's because in our chapter 3 models.py file for the seller, the name field that we created, we gave it a verbose name of equal to business name. So that's where Django's actually getting that information from to print into the title of this column. The order of that column is based on the order in which you put those items within this list. So if I were to change that by putting super user at the beginning, we'll notice that super user status gets added to the front. Our list display links tells Django which of these columns we want to make actually clickable, or a call to action, which then takes us to edit that object on what it calls a change view page. So we can see that the username and then the name field, otherwise known as the business name, is clickable. And as I'm hovering over it, if you look at the bottom of the screen, it shows you the path, which is Chapter 3 Seller 1, 1 being the numeric ID of that object, and / change. And hovering over this one, we see that it's the exact same link. Entering into that object, we're now on the change view, and here fields are grouped based on the field set that we set within our class. So here is the field sets option, and it's grouped by category of fields. So, such as personal information, permissions, important dates, and vehicles is commented out here because we are actually using an inline field set instead. And that's depicted by this inlines option here, which then uses this custom-made vehicles inline class that we created at the top of our file using a tabular inline. So it's here that we're linking it to the vehicles related to a seller. And by extra, we're telling Django to only provide one extra blank field in case we wanted to actually add one on the fly. So if we change that extra to, say, 5 and refresh this page, we're going to see 5 blank fields. And my computer normally doesn't take that long to refresh. I'm not sure why it's doing that today. So then the add field sets. This differs from the field sets above in that only these fields will display within this particular order on the add view page versus the change view page. So this is the change view page. We could get back to the list or the change list of the sellers by clicking on this breadcrumb up here. Then we could go to add a seller, and I'm just going to open this in a new tab. And so we can see on this page we do have a different set of fields that are available to us based on that add field sets option that we defined here. And then going back to our change list view, the ordering is telling Django what order we want to actually display the results on this page. And so it is going to order them by username in alphabetical order. It's here where we could use a minus or a dash in order to say we want it to go from Z to A instead of A to Z, or 0 to 1 versus 9 to 0. Search fields tells Django which of these fields or which of these columns we're actually going to search for information in. So for instance, if I wanted to search admin, I'm going to get one result. We could at least see up in our browser that it is passing a query string, the Q query string, and searching for the admin for the value. I'm going to go ahead and comment out the username from within this. I'm just going to refresh this page and then search again. I do have admin as the value of the first name. And so once I commented out both of those columns, I'm now getting 0 results. And we can still see up in our browser that I am still searching for that query. And then we have this, these two fields here where we could actually edit these fields if we wanted to without even having to go into the change view in order to do it. So if I save this here, and then I went back to my change view and I just refreshed this page, we'll see that it actually did save that object and then repopulated it based off of what was updated in our database. And that is dictated by this list editable option right here. And that concludes this video for now. In this video, we'll begin working with custom admin class methods, and specifically so that we could serve up a different form, custom form class for different situations, such as when a model is either saved or deleted, or if we're on the change view versus the add view page, or if we're logged in as a super user or not a super user. And before we get into this, let's go ahead and make sure we have one user that is a super user and one user that is not within our database. So if you go to your admin panel and click on the sellers, and this is because in Chapter 3 we converted the Django user into a Chapter 3 seller. We can see that at least in my table I only have the one user or seller, whichever you want to call it, that was provided in the Chapter 3 data fixture. You may have some more if you've gone through some of the exercises throughout the book, and that's fine. But let's go ahead and add a seller. I'm going to call this one test. I'm going to give it the same password as the admin that's provided with the picture of this book. You can give it any password you like. And the rest of these fields are not required, and so I'm just going to leave them blank. The one thing that we do want to click after this object has been created and these additional fields become visible to us, we do want to make sure that the user is a staff status and not a super user. And the staff status designates whether or not we can log into the admin site. And the rest of these permissions, let's leave these untouched for now, but we are going to come back to them. Let's see what happens without doing anything at this time. So I'm going to save this. Now we can see that we have two users. One of them is a staff and one of them is no longer a staff. Within your chapter 6 admin.py file, under the seller admin class, go ahead and create or uncomment this get form definition. And it's in here that we're going to print the currently logged in user just for information within our console. So throughout some of these examples you may see this printed over and over again. And the idea here is that we're going to check to see if an object exists, and that's going to designate whether or not we're on the change list or the change view versus the add view. So if an object does not exist, we're actually on the add view and we'll want to serve up this add seller form. If we're on the change view, then we want to check to see if the currently logged in user is a super user, and we'll serve up this super user form. If not, we'll serve up a regular seller form. If we jump to where these are defined, we'll see that they are found in the chapter 6 forms.py file. And all we're focusing on in this chapter is just creating the logic that points to these custom forms. We're not actually diving in and customizing these forms and making them 100% functional. A lot of that is discussed earlier in chapter 5. But for now, we're just initializing them and adding a print statement to designate which form is actually being loaded or initialized when we look at it in our console. And each one of these is linked to the seller model, and we're telling it to just give me every field that exists. So very generic and very basic. One of the reasons why we created our user first and why I discussed some of this is because if we were to go and click add seller now, we're going to get a key error, and that's because it's looking for some fields that might not exist at this time, because we did tell each one of these just to use all fields for now. But the point of this exercise is to actually look at our console, and if we scroll up to the beginning of this request, we do see that it is showing us the add seller form initialized print statement. So we can at least know that it's hitting this class and not that class or this class. So then if we go back to edit any one of these, to trigger that an object does exist and dictate that we're actually on the change view. We'll see that it actually loads without an error because all of the fields that it requires for the change view are actually present. Scrolling down to the bottom of my console, we'll see that the seller super user form was in fact initialized. And so if we wanted to test how the traditional seller form is accessed, let's go and log in to a new browser. Let's leave this browser open. And we're going to log in with that test user that we just created. Here I'm going to type test, my new password. And this is where we're now going to circle back to the permissions that I discussed earlier. So now I'm logged into the admin panel because I do have staff status, but I don't have permission to do anything. I can't click on anything. So it's very locked down. And the reason why that is, and the reason why we left our super user open in the original browser, let's go and edit that particular user at this time. So that's that test user. It's in here where we can either give it a group if we've created groups, and groups are a way where you can predefine a set of user permissions and be able to apply that to multiple users throughout your system. In either case, whether a group is or is not defined, you could still go down here and give individual, more granular permissions on a case-by-case basis. And so for this one, I'm going to give it the add, change, delete, and view permission for just the seller table. And then I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now if we go back to the same browser that you have logged in with that test user and refresh your admin panel, you'll see that now we can at least edit the sellers table. Everything else is not present because we don't have permission for editing that at this time. And the difference between a super user and not a super user is that a super user is going to automatically give you every permission that exists by default. So be careful how you use super user statuses. It may be wise to just have one true super user and then maybe have an admin level group that you've defined for most permissions, but maybe not every permission. So now it's in here where we could go and edit any one of these. And the idea here is that we want to look in our console and see that the seller form was actually initialized and not the super user seller form. So that is good. One thing you will note that you can go into the admin user instead of the test user. Let me go to the correct browser before I show you this. So note that I'm actually logged in with the test user in this browser, and now I'm going to click on the admin user to edit that and see that I can actually edit it at this time. In order to prevent that is where you would actually want to perform some fancy logic within within this seller form class in order to restrict editing a user that is not the currently logged in user, and apply that same logic to any other models within your database that might fall into that category. So permissions can get even more granular when you start coding them within your classes. Going back to our admin.py file, let's move on to the let's move out of the seller admin class and let's move into the engine admin class. Here we can see that I've defined the same get form definition or method, whichever you want to call it. So we'll expect to see some of the same print statements, and those are defined up here. But what we're also going to look for and practice with now is saving an object and deleting an object. And here what I'm doing is I'm just creating the ability to tie into the save event. And so this line on line number 78 is actually what's going to perform the save action. So if you wanted to do something, fire off an email or create a report or any number of things that you might want to do before the object is actually saved, you could even manipulate some of the data that is being saved before it's being saved. That would go above this action on line 78. Anything that you wanted to perform after the object has actually been saved, say it's been successfully saved, now I want to actually fire off that email, we would put any of that code within this subsection. The same logic applies with your delete action. And so that's where this save model and delete model come in. Note that one thing different in these is that the save model has a form and change argument or attribute, and the delete model does not. So going back to the original browser where I'm logged in with my admin user, I'm just going to save any one of these. Actually, I'm going to go to the engine first. And then I'm going to save one of these. I don't have to change any of the data, I'm just going to click the save button. And so here we could actually see that my before save and my after save print statements are actually being fired. The same logic applies if we wanted to delete an item. We can either click into that item to delete it, or we could use one of these actions right here and delete either one or many of them at the same time. And by default, Django will create the delete action, but you can create custom actions as well. And whether you clicked into that object to hit delete, or if you used an action like I did here, for any of the delete views, Django does provide you with an "Are you sure?" prompter, which also lists any of the related objects that may or may not be deleted, depending on whether or not you are preserving them or choosing to delete them at the same time. And those are done on the model level. So yes, I'm sure. We'll delete it. In this video, I'm just going to discuss the delete model method found within our engine admin class. I left off with this in the last video. I just discovered something rather unique in this video. And so what I did was I loaded my fixture again, reran my project. We can see that it's running now. I put my screen side by side, that way it'd be a little bit easier to see this in the video. At home I actually have 3 monitors set up, so it's a little bit easier for me to sort my open windows that way. I'm going to go back to the engines, and here you can see that I am logged in with the super user that I've got created for my database. I'm going to click on the engines table, and we do have both of the engines that are provided in the chapter 3 fixture loaded into my database at this time. In the previous video, what we were hoping to look for is this before delete and after delete print statement for the delete model. These are just ways to tie into the natural or default delete action and save action of Django. One thing I noticed was that I used the actions drop down in order to delete the item that I was trying to demonstrate in the last video, so I'm going to trigger it again here. I'm going to delete engines, click go, have my console open, and then I'm going to select yes, I'm sure I really do want to delete this item. Go for it. And over here we'll notice that it deleted the item, but we're not seeing the print statements that we were hoping to see. So that is one difference. I don't know if it's something new to this version of Django. This is the latest version of Django, 4.0 by the way, which you could see if you jump ahead to chapter 9. We'll learn how to install this later. But here we can see that we're on version 4.0.2 right now. This will tell you everything that's installed and all the versions. So in this particular version, if we click into the object where we're on the change view page, we'll see that it actually loaded up our engine super user form, so that we know in fact that we have an object and I am logged in as the super user, as you see here. But if we hit the delete button on this page and keep a close eye on the console over here, we'll see that it gives us the same prompter. Yes, I'm sure I want to delete it. Go for it. And it's in this particular view only, which is rather unique, that you can actually tie into the before and after functions or states. So if you were relying on the quick action bar on the change list view page, odds are you're going to have to add or tie into this in some other place. Just keep that in mind. And that concludes this video.